As Daniel and Stein tore my grandmother's portrait from the wall, plotting to burn every trace of my family's history, I clenched my fists in the surveillance hub, vowing they'd pay. The coffee was still warm in my hands, its bitter steam curling under my nose, when Daniel dropped the bomb. "What if we moved the wedding up to spring?" he said, leaning against the sun-drenched counter of our San Francisco kitchen, his smile as polished as his Rolex. The morning light poured through the Victorian stained glass window, splintering into rainbows across his face. He looked perfect, too perfect. My stomach twisted, though I couldn't pin why. His timing was off. I'm Emily Harper, a real estate attorney with a knack for saving historic homes from wrecking balls. My grandmother's Presidio Heights Victorian, with its creaking oak floors and hand-carved banisters, isn't just a house, it's my soul. I inherited it at 22, along with her fierce love for preserving what matters. Daniel Mercer, my investment banker fiancé, proposed 18 months ago on a cliff overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. Champagne, sunset, the works. I thought I was living a dream scripted by Nora Ephron. But dreams have a way of curdling. Last night, I couldn't sleep. Daniel was out, working late again, and I was curled up in my study, scrolling through emails. A banking alert pinged First Republic, my personal account. Tiny test transactions, 97 cents, $1.03, from an account I didn't recognize. My pulse quickened. I cross-checked our joint accounts, my trust fund, even the escrow for my Lake Tahoe cabin. Nothing matched. A hidden account, cloaked in shadows, was probing mine. My fingers froze over the keyboard. A chill snaked down my spine, cold as the fog rolling off the bay. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I sipped my coffee now, studying him across the kitchen island. His chestnut hair was tousled just so, his navy blazer slung over a chair like he'd stepped out of a Brooks Brothers ad. "Spring's only 4 months away," I said, forcing a smile. "Why the rush?" My voice sounded steady, but my heart was a jackhammer. He shrugged, stirring his espresso with a silver spoon. "Just feels right. You, me, cherry blossoms at City Hall." His eyes held mine, warm and earnest, but something flickered beneath like a shark gliding under calm water. I remembered the first time he walked into this house, 2 years ago. He'd traced the stained glass roses with his fingertips, marveling at their craftsmanship. "This place is you," he'd said. I'd melted, thinking he saw me, loved what I loved. Now, a darker thought clawed its way up, he wasn't admiring it. He was casing it. The kitchen clock ticked, loud in the silence. I set my mug down, the ceramic clinking against the marble. "I'll think about it," I said, my tone light, though my chest felt like it was caving in. He nodded, grabbed his briefcase, and kissed my forehead. "Love you, Em." The door clicked shut behind him, and I exhaled, my breath ragged. Alone, I sank into a chair, the weight of doubt pressing me into the wood. I replayed our life together, searching for cracks. Daniel was charm personified, dinners at Quint's, weekends in Napa, whispered promises in bed. But there were moments, small ones, I'd brushed off. His phone buzzing at 3 a.m., screen angled away. A locked drawer in his office I'd never questioned. The way he'd tense when I mentioned my grandmother's trust, the one tied to this house. I'd chalked it up to stress, his high-stakes job at Goldman Sachs. Now those moments glowed like warning signs. I pulled my laptop onto the island, the banking alert still open. The transactions were flagged as pending verification. I logged into my security system, a high-end setup I'd installed after a break-in scare last year. The Victorian's cameras were discreet, tucked into crown molding and bookshelves. I hadn't checked the footage in months. My finger hovered over the app, a voice in my head screaming to stop, to trust him. But my gut roared louder. I opened the feed from last night. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. There was Daniel, in my foyer, his face lit by the chandelier's glow. My breath caught. He wasn't alone. A woman's sleek blonde hair, red-soled heels stepped in behind him. Vanessa Reynolds, a luxury realtor I'd met at a preservation gala. She gestured at the wainscoting, her lips moving soundlessly. Daniel nodded, pointing to the staircase. My hand shook as I turned up the audio. It's pristine, Vanessa said, her voice crisp. The craftsmanship alone will fetch millions. You're sure she's on board? Daniel's laugh was low, sharp. Emily's too busy saving other people's houses to notice her own. Trust me, it's handled. My blood turned to ice. I gripped the laptop, knuckles white. They moved through my grandmother's home like vultures circling a corpse. Vanessa ran her hand over the fireplace mantel, the one I'd spent months restoring. Daniel opened a drawer in my study, pulling out a folder I didn't recognize. My vision blurred, hot tears stinging my eyes. I paused the footage, his face frozen in a half-smirk. The man I loved, who'd held me through nightmares, who'd promised forever, was selling my home out from under me. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word, it was a knife, flaying me open, exposing every vulnerable piece of me I'd trusted him with. I wanted to scream, to hurl the laptop across the room. But a colder, sharper part of me took over, the part that had fought developers in court and won. I rewound the tape, watching again, memorizing every word, every glance. Vanessa mentioned a buyer, someone discreet with cash ready. Daniel promised clear title by summer. My mind raced. The house was in my trust, untouchable, or so I thought. Those test transactions weren't random. He was laying groundwork, testing my accounts, maybe even my identity. I closed my eyes, picturing my grandmother's face, her gray eyes, the way she'd taught me to spot a liar. People show you who they are, Emily. Believe them. I'd been blind, dazzled by Daniel's charm, but not anymore. My tears dried, replaced by a fury so fierce it felt like molten steel. I didn't know how deep his scheme went, or what else he'd stolen, but I knew this: he'd underestimated me. I saved the footage to a hidden drive, my fingers steady now. Daniel would be back tonight, expecting his doting fiancé. I'd get her smiling, cooking, laughing. But beneath the mask, I was already planning. This wasn't just about my heart anymore. It was about my home, my name, my legacy. And I'd be damned if I let him take it. The air in my grandmother's Victorian felt heavy, like it was holding its breath alongside me. Daniel's betrayal pulsed in my chest, a wound that burned hotter with every heartbeat. Last night's security footage played on a loop in my mind, his smirk, Vanessa's greedy fingers tracing my home's bones. I stood in the foyer, staring at the chandelier that had bathed them in light as they plotted to steal my legacy. My hands curled into fists. This wasn't just a broken heart. It was a violation, a theft of everything I was. I needed proof, hard, undeniable evidence. Daniel was still out, working late again, his lies as smooth as the tailored suits he wore. I moved fast, driven by a fury that felt like fire in my veins. His office was upstairs, a sleek corner of the house he'd claimed with a mahogany desk and locked cabinets. I'd never questioned the locks before. Love makes you stupid like that. Now, I saw them for what they were, cages for his secrets. The safe was hidden behind a framed print of the Bay Bridge, a gift he'd given me last Christmas. Irony twisted my gut as I slid the frame aside. The safe's keypad glowed faintly, mocking me. I didn't have the code, but I had something better: memory. Daniel was meticulous, but he wasn't perfect. I'd seen him punch in numbers once, half asleep, thinking I wasn't watching. My fingers trembled as I tried April 12, 19, our engagement date. The safe beeped, and the door clicked open. My breath caught. Inside was a velvet box, a stack of documents, and a flash drive. I opened the box first. A ring in antique sapphire, not the heirloom he'd claimed was his mother's. The stone was cold against my skin, stolen, just like his promises. The documents were worse. Deeds, contracts, a purchase agreement for my Presidio Heights home, all bearing my signature. Except I'd never signed them. My name, forged in precise strokes, stared back at me. My vision blurred, not with tears but with rage. He hadn't just betrayed me, he'd weaponized my identity, turned our love into a con. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop, my hand steady now, fueled by silent fury. Files loaded, financial records, emails, a spreadsheet titled Harper Assets. My Lake Tahoe cabin, my grandmother's trust, even client properties I'd saved from developers, every piece of my life, cataloged like loot. An email to Vanessa Reynolds read, title cleared by June. Buyer wired $2 million deposit. My stomach churned. He was selling my home, my world, to strangers. I needed help, someone who could see through the fog of his lies. I called Michael Chen, a private investigator I'd met during a zoning dispute. His voice was calm, steady, like a lifeline. Emily, what's wrong? I told him everything: the footage, the safe, the forged signatures. He didn't hesitate. Send me what you've got. I'll dig. Next, I dialed Judge Eleanor Montgomery, my late mother's closest friend. Her voice, weathered by years on the bench, crackled through the phone. Emily, darling, what's happened? I laid it out, my words sharp, cutting through the pain. Eleanor's silence was heavy. Then, this isn't just betrayal, Emily. It's criminal identity theft. We'll nail him. Michael called back within hours, his tone grim. Daniel's linked to shell companies in Delaware and Nevada: Westbrook Holdings, Henderson Trust. He's been funneling money through them for years. Your house is just the latest. He paused. There's more. 2 other women: Ellen Whitaker in Boston, Rebecca Chambers in Chicago. Same MO: engaged, charmed, then gutted. They lost everything: homes, savings, names. The words hit like a sledgehammer. My pain wasn't unique, it was a blueprint. Daniel wasn't just a liar, he was a predator, a serial thief who preyed on trust. And now, Michael said, he was targeting my clients' properties, historic estates I'd fought to preserve. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was a multi-million-dollar con, a web of deceit that stretched across states, with my life at its center. I sat in the dark, the house creaking around me, as the weight of it sank in. My grandmother's portrait hung in the hall, her gray eyes watching. I could almost hear her: protect what's sacred. I'd failed her, letting him into her home, my heart. But failure wasn't final, not yet. I closed my laptop, my resolve hardening like steel. Daniel came home at midnight, his tie loosened, his smile as fake as the ring in his safe. Long day, babe, he said, kissing me goodnight. His lips felt like poison. I smiled back, my face a mask, while inside, I made a vow: I would burn his empire to ash. He thought he knew me, sweet, trusting Emily, the preservationist who loved old houses and happy endings. He had no idea who he'd awakened. I lay awake beside him, his breathing steady, oblivious. My mind churned, piecing together his lies. The forged documents, the shell companies, the other women: each fact was a brick in the wall I was building, a fortress to trap him. I thought of Ellen and Rebecca, their lives shattered, their names stolen. I thought of my clients, their legacies at risk. My fury wasn't just for me, it was for all of us, the women he'd underestimated. By dawn, I had a plan. I'd play the doting fiancé, keep him close while I gathered more evidence. Michael was already tracing the shell companies, pulling threads that would unravel Daniel's world. Eleanor was ready to wield her judicial power, quietly alerting authorities. I wasn't just fighting for my home, I was fighting for justice, for every piece of me he'd tried to erase. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and stood in the foyer again. The stained glass roses glowed in the morning light, a reminder of what I was fighting for. This house wasn't just wood and glass, it was my grandmother's laughter, my mother's stories, my identity. Daniel thought he could steal it, sell it, break me. He was wrong. I wasn't the prey here. He was. The mirror reflected a stranger: perfectly curled hair, a practiced smile, the emerald dress Daniel loved. I was Emily Harper, devoted fiancé, pouring wine for his colleagues at our dining table, laughing at his Wall Street stories. But beneath the act, I was a blade, honed and hidden, ready to carve through his lies. Every clink of crystal, every forced giggle, was a countdown to his downfall. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with the thrill of the hunt. By day, I played my role flawlessly. I planned our spring wedding, pinning cherry blossom centerpieces on Pinterest, cooing over venues with Daniel over breakfast. He'd squeeze my hand, oblivious, his eyes gleaming with that predator's charm. "You're my everything, Em," he'd say, and I'd nod, my smile sweet as poison. But at night, when he slept, I shed that skin. I became the Avenger, slipping into his world to dismantle it piece by piece. His office was my first target. I'd noticed his fingerprint scanner, a sleek pad guarding his laptop and files. During a movie night, I swiped his whiskey glass, lifted his prints with tape, and sent them to Michael Chen. 2 days later, he delivered a silicone clone, cool and pliable in my palm. "Be careful, Emily," he warned. "He's not just a con man, he's dangerous." I nodded, but danger felt like fuel now, igniting the fury that kept me sharp. At 2 a.m., I crept upstairs, the Victorian's floors silent under my bare feet. The scanner beeped green, and his laptop hummed to life. My pulse was a drumbeat, each second a gunshot. Files unfolded, spreadsheets on my Lake Tahoe cabin, my Presidio Heights trust, even my client's estate's Nob Hill mansions, Pacific Heights gems. He'd mapped their weaknesses, from shaky titles to desperate heirs. Worse, I found dossiers on his past victims, Ellen Whitaker's divorce records, Rebecca Chambers' therapy notes. He'd studied their pain, weaponized it. My stomach twisted, but I copied everything to a hidden drive, my hands steady. A noise downstairs froze me, keys jingling. Michael's text buzzed, "He's back early." My heart lurched. I wiped the laptop's history, shut it down, and sprinted to the bathroom. The shower hissed just as the front door creaked open. I slipped into a robe, tousled my hair, and stepped out, feigning sleepy surprise. "Babe? You're early." Daniel's eyes swept over me, lingering too long, searching for cracks in my mask. "Client cancelled," he said, his voice smooth but edged. I kissed his cheek, my skin crawling, and he relaxed. "Barely." I needed allies, people who could match his cunning. At Brennan and White, my mother's old law firm, I met Margaret Brennan in her corner office, her silver hair as sharp as her mind. I showed her the forged deeds, the shell companies, the stolen ring. Her lips thinned. "He's not just a thief, Emily, he's a parasite. We'll protect your name and expose his accomplices." She flagged Timothy Reynolds, Vanessa's brother, and Bradley Wilson, a title officer, as Daniel's inside men. Her promise was steel, they'll fall with him. Over tea at Samovar, I met Diane Hargrove, ex-wife of Julian Hargrove, the developer eyeing my home for condos. Her Chanel suit couldn't hide the fire in her eyes when I told her Julian was Daniel's partner. "That bastard," she hissed. "He tried to bulldoze my family's estate too." I showed her the surveillance stills, Daniel and Julian shaking hands. Diane's jaw tightened. "My preservation trust will block his permits. He won't touch your house." Her alliance felt like armor, forged in shared betrayal. Michael's surveillance deepened the stakes. He planted bugs in Daniel's car, capturing a meeting with Jacob Stein, a fixer with a rap sheet from Oakland to Vegas. Their voices crackled through my earbuds. "The Harper legacy needs cleansing," Stein growled. "Kazarian's impatient." "Armin Kazarian, a name tied to international money laundering," Michael confirmed. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a local con, it was global, with my home as collateral. The noose was tightening, not around me, but around them. Each discovery sharpened my resolve, but the cost was heavy. I barely slept, my dreams haunted by my grandmother's face, her voice urging me to fight. One night, in Daniel's office, I found a forged letter, yellowed to look old, claiming my grandmother had agreed to sell the Victorian. My hands shook, tears spilling before I could stop them. It wasn't just paper, it was her memory, defiled. I sank to the floor, clutching the letter, my grief raw and jagged. But then I stood, wiping my face. Crying was for later. Now, I had to be ruthless. I stashed the letter with my evidence, my focus laser sharp. Daniel's empire was a house of cards, and I was pulling the foundation. But he was no fool. At dinner, his questions grew pointed. "You've been quiet, Em. Work stressing you out?" His smile was a trap, his eyes probing. I laughed, twirling pasta on my fork. "Just saving the world, one old house at a time." He nodded, but his gaze lingered, a predator sensing blood. I leaned on Michael's updates to stay ahead. His latest video showed Daniel and Stein in a dimly lit bar, discussing loose ends. My name came up, and Stein's words chilled me: "If she digs, we bury her." I gripped my phone, my fear swallowed by fury. They thought I was a mark, a naive fiancé to be fleeced. They didn't know I was building a cage, bar by bar, with their own words as the lock. By week's end, I was a ghost in my own life, smiling bride by day, relentless hunter by night. The Victorian felt alive, its creaks and shadows cheering me on. My grandmother's portrait watched from the hall, her eyes fierce with pride. I wasn't just fighting for me, I was fighting for Ellen, Rebecca, my clients, every woman Daniel had broken. His empire would burn, and I'd light the match. My garage was a war room, its walls alive with screens and shadows. Surveillance feeds flickered, casting Daniel's face in grainy blue light as he rifled through my grandmother's study. My pulse thundered, each beat a vow to end him. I'd spent weeks playing his game, smiling fiancé by day, avenger by night, but now the board was mine. Every move he made, every lie he spun, was a thread in the net I'd woven. Tonight, he'd walk into it. I leaned closer to the monitor, watching him and Jacob Stein tear through my family's records. Stein, with his buzzed head and shark's eyes, yanked my grandmother's portrait from the wall, tossing it like trash. My nails dug into my palms, drawing blood, but I didn't flinch. Rage was my anchor, keeping me steady. Daniel held up a leather-bound journal, my grandmother's, filled with sketches of the Victorian stained glass. "This'll fetch a pretty penny," he sneered. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to breathe. Every second was evidence, a nail in their coffin. The plan was airtight, built with allies who matched my fury. At First Continental Trust, I met Harrison Wells, a banker with a poker face and a vendetta against fraud. Over black coffee, I showed him Daniel's shell company's Westbrook Holdings, Henderson Trust siphoning millions. "He's using your accounts as bait," I said, sliding over bank statements flagged with test transactions. Harrison's eyes narrowed. "I'll set up decoy accounts to mislead him. He'll think he's winning until he's broke." By noon, he'd rerouted Daniel's wires into a digital dead end, a financial mirage that would keep him chasing ghosts. At the county recorder's office, Maitline Chen, a clerk with a hacker's edge, became my next weapon. She'd worked with me on a preservation case years ago, her loyalty fierce. I handed her a USB drive with Daniel's forged deeds. "He's filing these to flip my properties," I said. She scanned the files, her lips curling. "I'll flag every transaction, title disputes, lien holds. He'll be stuck in legal purgatory." Later, she texted me, grinning through emojis, "Julian Hargrove's demolition permit for my home was dead, thanks to Diane Hargrove's Preservation Trust." The board was tilting in my favor. My garage command center hummed, a fortress of vengeance. Michael Chen's bugs fed me real-time audio from Daniel's car, his office, even his phone. One clip made my skin crawl. Stein, his voice gravelly, said, "Burn the documents if she gets too close." Daniel laughed. "Emily's too soft for that. She's no threat." My blood boiled, but I let their arrogance fuel me. Every word was recorded, timestamped, backed up on servers Michael swore were untouchable. They were digging their own graves, and I was handing them the shovels. The sickest moment came at 1 a.m. On screen, Stein paced my study, clutching a gasoline can. "Fire's cleaner," he muttered. "No paper trail." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. My stomach lurched, bile rising. I gripped the desk, my vision swimming. They'd burn my grandmother's legacy, her journals, her sketches, the house that held her soul, to cover their tracks. For a second, I wanted to storm in, scream, tear them apart. But I didn't. I whispered to myself, stay sharp, Emily. They're done. The footage was gold, a federal prosecutor's dream. I leaned on my allies to tighten the screws. Judge Eleanor Montgomery, her voice like iron over the phone, froze assets tied to Daniel's shell companies, citing irregularities. She didn't name me, keeping my cover intact. They won't know what hit them, she said, her tone laced with grim satisfaction. Diane called next, her voice cold as marble. Julian's panicking, his investors are pulling out. He knows the trust's got him cornered. I pictured Julian's smug face crumbling, and a dark thrill ran through me. Daniel's empire was cracking, and I was the fault line. But the game was dangerous. Daniel's suspicions were growing, his questions sharper. Over dinner at Gary Danko, he watched me too closely, his fork pausing midair. You seem distracted, Em. Something on your mind? His tone was light, but his eyes were knives. I sipped my Pinot Noir, my smile a shield. Just work. You know how it is saving old houses, saving the world. He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. I knew I was running out of time. Michael's surveillance kept me one step ahead. A new video showed Daniel meeting Armin Kazarian at a pier in Oakland, the bay's fog swallowing their silhouettes. Kazarian, his accent thick, demanded clean assets by month's end. No more delays, Mercer, he growled. Daniel nodded, sweat beading on his brow. I saved the clip, my heart racing. Kazarian's involvement tied Daniel to international crime, money laundering, maybe worse. The net was closing, its edges razor sharp. I worked in silence, my grandmother's house a partner in my fight. Its creaks felt like whispers, urging me on. I hid my evidence in a false panel behind the fireplace, a trick my grandmother taught me as a kid. Her portrait, now back on the wall, watched over me. I touched its frame, drawing strength. They won't win, I murmured. Her gray eyes seemed to nod. By dawn, I was exhausted but unbreakable. The trap was set: financial decoys, legal roadblocks, surveillance piling up like dynamite. Daniel thought he was hunting me, but I was the predator, my claws hidden in plain sight. I cooked breakfast, humming as he shuffled in, his tie loose. Morning, babe, he said, kissing my cheek. I smiled, my heart a furnace. He had no idea the fire was coming for him. The cuffs snapped around Daniel's wrists at 8:17 a.m., the sound sharper than a gunshot. He stood in my office, his bespoke suit rumpled, his face collapsing from smug to stunned as federal agents swarmed. I watched from the hallway, my heart a drumbeat of triumph and pain. The man who'd promised me forever was now a caged animal, his empire of lies crumbling under the weight of my vengeance. I'd spent months building this moment, and now it was here, raw and real, like a storm breaking over the bay. The takedown was surgical. Michael Chen's surveillance had tipped off the FBI, pinpointing Daniel, Jacob Stein, and Armin Kazarian. Stein was nabbed at an Oakland warehouse, surrounded by crates of forged art. Kazarian went down at the Fairmont, his suitcase stuffed with cash. My garage monitors showed it all: 3 screens, 3 arrests, 3 predators snared. Daniel's arrest hit hardest. An agent read his charges: wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering. His eyes darted, searching for an exit that didn't exist. For a second, they found me. I didn't look away. I followed him to the federal building, where I stood behind a one-way mirror, watching him squirm in a steel chair. The interrogator, a wiry man with a buzz cut, spread my evidence across the table: forged deeds, bank records, surveillance stills. You're looking at decades, Mercer, he said. Daniel's charm was gone, his face pale, his hands cuffed. Stein had already turned, spilling details of their con, how they'd targeted my trust, my clients, even my grandmother's memory. Kazarian's testimony tied Daniel to a global syndicate, his shell companies a front for dirty money. The mountain of proof was unassailable, my months of sleepless nights now a blade at his throat. Daniel cracked at hour 3. I'll cooperate, he muttered, head bowed. The plea deal came fast, 20 years, maybe 15 with good behavior. His Tesla, his Rolex, his custom suits stripped away. I felt a hollow thrill, not joy, but justice, cold and final. He'd stolen my name, my home, my heart, but I'd taken his future. The interrogator glanced at the mirror, as if sensing me. I nodded, invisible, my fury finally easing into something sharper, closure. They let me face him, one last time, in a gray room that smelled of disinfectant. Daniel sat, shackled, his eyes bloodshot. "Emily," he started, his voice soft, pleading. "I loved you. I can make this right, your grandmother's journal, it's yours, I swear." I stared, my face a mask of ice. Love? He'd forged my signature, sold my legacy, defiled my trust. "Where's the hidden safe?" I asked, my voice flat. He flinched, then gave an address, a lockbox in Sausalito. No apologies, no forgiveness. I walked out, the doors clanged my final word. Back at the Victorian, I reclaimed what was mine. I rehung my grandmother's portrait, her gray eyes fierce with approval. The house felt alive again, its creaks a song of victory. I hosted a quiet celebration in the dining room, the stained glass roses glowing. Judge Eleanor Montgomery raised a glass of Merlot. "To reclaiming what was stolen," she said, her voice steady. Michael Chen, Margaret Brennan, and Diane Hargrove clinked their glasses, their faces lit with pride. We toasted justice, legacy, and the women. Daniel underestimated Ellen Whitaker, Rebecca Chambers, and me. The aftermath was bittersweet. Cleaning my grandmother's study, I found a letter tucked in her desk, her handwriting bold. "Protect what's sacred," she wrote, "and never let them dim your fire." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. She'd be proud. I hadn't just survived, I'd turned the predator into prey, exposing a con that spanned states and continents. The FBI recovered assets for Daniel's victims, including my clients' estates. My name was cleared, my home safe, my trust restored. But the scars lingered. I walked the Victorian's halls, remembering Daniel's first visit, his fingers tracing the wainscoting. I thought it was love, it was larceny. The betrayal cut deep, a wound that would fade but never vanish. Yet it forged me, too sharper, fiercer, unbreakable. I stood in the foyer, the chandelier's light splintering into rainbows, and vowed to keep fighting, not just for my legacy, but for anyone whose trust is weaponized. Now, I turn to you. What would you do when trust turns to treason? Would you play the long game, weaving a trap like I did, or confront the betrayer head-on, risking it all? Betrayal tests us, reveals us. Share your thoughts. How would you reclaim what's sacred?